Welcome to Coping with COVID-19. I'm Dr. Allie Sharma. This interview series is a safe space to collectively share our stories through the COVID-19 pandemic. Quick disclaimer, please note that this interview series is for informational purposes only and it's not considered medical advice. Please consult your own provider for any issues you may be facing, and if you are in crisis, please call 911 or your local emergency services. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Michael Kouly. Michael is the author of 10 books on leadership and strategy. He studied at Harvard, Princeton, Maastricht, and the American University of Beirut. He started his career as a war journalist with Reuters and later became the president of Reuters Middle East and the CEO of Orbit Television Network. Michael is a World Bank Fellow and is currently the president of Cambridge Institute for Global Leadership and of the Kouly Institute, a think tank for executive learning. Michael's philanthropic work includes being a board member and chairman of a number of regional leadership academies in Asia, the Middle East, and Eurasia. He is a global thinker, a professional speaker, advisor to boards of directors and heads of states. Michael has trained thousands of top executives and senior officials. His purpose is Michael has trained thousands of top executives and senior officials. His purpose is to develop the leadership capacity of people so they can bring light and prosperity to themselves, their families, organizations, communities, and the world. His upcoming book is This is Leadership, Taking Leadership Back to Its Core. I am bringing Michael on to join me now.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to have you in my interview series.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I would love to start. You are an expert in leadership, and I personally would love to hear your perspective on what constitutes effective leadership during a global crisis as now. And if you could just tell us a few examples that you find noteworthy or important to point out.
Okay. When I talk about leadership, I usually go to the core of the subject, of the matter itself. And I try to put leadership in perspective. So for me, leadership is a process for something that is much deeper. And that deeper thing is actually life. So the way I look at it is that, we're here, we're alive. And by default, we seem to have a common purpose. All living organisms, especially human beings or including human beings, and that is to survive and to grow at different aspects of our, at the different dimensions of our being, whether it is biological, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, you name it. So the core idea is, how do we maintain, how do we create a rich and prosperous and hopeful and resilient journey and experience of living. So what really matters is to create a beautiful and thriving experience of living. That's the core. So leadership comes in the context of making sure that this happens. Now, in life, sometimes things are moving slowly and beautifully. Things are, cruise control. Everything is great, and sometimes even everything is exceptionally well. And sometimes things, you get turbulences and storms. And maybe sometimes you're in the eye of the storm, and sometimes maybe you get tsunamis. So that's the nature of reality itself, because that's the reality of nature, So that's how it is. So for me, leadership is about mobilizing people, whether they are individuals or organizations or systems, communities, countries, even the global community, so that this community or these people and this organization is successful in dealing with its challenges of survival and of growth, or is successful in creating opportunities for prosperity and abundance and well-being and growth. So the idea is, the keywords are mobilizing, lots of mobilization, and people, because in the end it's about people, whether they are, in an organization or in a family or in a community. And there is a journey towards a purpose. And for me, leadership is a value-based activity. It's not a technical activity of mobilization. So there has to be this value about making life in the end better. If life is suffering, so how we can reduce the suffering and make it more bearable. And if life is good, then how can we make it even better? So there's the purpose element is very important. So that includes a situation where we live in a crisis conditions. And that's also part of reality. I mean, sometimes things are unpredictable and sometimes often things are unpredictable, especially when we're talking about complex systems, like the world that we have created, that is complicated and complex beyond comprehension. I mean, you're a psychiatrist and you're an expert in this field, and you know that it would take many lifetimes just to start even begin having a grasp of what a single human being is all about, you know,
Yes.
with all the multiple facets and the dimensions and the personalities. And, you know, it goes, the roots go almost endlessly deep, right? So we're talking, this is one individual. So imagine two individuals, right? And how exponentially complicated it takes, because it happens because then we become, you know, multiple layers communicating at multiple layers and dimensions. And then you can imagine the complexity of that. And that's evident usually in the nature of complex relationships that people and couples have with each other. So multiply that by 8 billion almost, and then you can see, and add to that the complexity of identities and history and fears and aspirations. I mean, this is like unimaginable complexity. So that by default creates crisis, because how can you control something that has, you know, billions and trillions of parameters and variables? So leadership, when this happened, the purpose of leadership is how to make sure that this crisis, which is a sudden change in reality, and the way we're defining it is a sudden, unwarranted or undesirable change of reality. How can we manage the situation? How we can navigate people through mobilizing them so that they can come out of this crisis to whatever we can call, you know, the previous normal. Although, you know, as a psychiatrist, you know that when you talk about the previous, it's never the previous normal again, because something happened and we're not the same. There's a layer of experience and pain and emotions and comprehension and awareness happened at, you know, different depths. So how we go back to as safely and as gently and as smoothly as possible to continue our journey of survival and growth. So if our survival was at stake, right, because of the crisis of leadership, or sorry, of the crisis that happened, then the challenge is how do we go back to ensure that our survival is not at stake anymore, right? That we're fine. If our growth journey was at stake, something happened to mess up our plans for growth and prosperity and abundance, then the leadership challenge is how do we fix that crisis and go back to the same, you know, uplifting trajectory of growth. So leadership for me is always contextual, and it's always about looking at the reality, diagnosing the reality with an open mind and with courage that looks at the entire complexity as much as possible, and then seeing how we take this reality and how we play with it and how we deal with it and navigate it so that we can create a relatively better reality. So that's how I define leadership. And what has happened recently is this major crisis that from the facade, it's a health crisis. But as you know, things are not unidimensional. There's so many layers into this. I mean, it has endless layers: political, geopolitical, social, values. I mean, you name it, because it's a manifestation of some kind of, you know, human behavior, or at least the reaction of human people to what nature does. So endless complexity. So what we're having now is this crisis, and what humanity now is involved in is how do we navigate ourselves out of this crisis so that at least we end up with minimum damage or the least possible damage. And if possibly, hopefully, you know, and then maybe, you know, I'm hoping too much, maybe we can learn something from it, you know, and end up in a situation where we are okay and little wiser, little wiser. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey of history itself. I mean, all history is like this. And it's not going to be the first crisis. There's going to be many of this. And now, as we get out of the health issue, we're going to go into the economy issue, and there's going to be the social implication, and there's going to be, I mean, you name it. There's no limit to how much you can cascade what's really happening. I mean, this will, as a psychiatrist, you know that. I mean, it's already starting to translate itself into relationships and marriages and suicides, and it has no end. So in any context a person is, whether it's at home or in business or in society or in public sector, so the key is to look around you and ask yourself, what's my reality? And what's the nature of reality in this particular context? And how can I do, what kind of interventions I can do so that I can mobilize people around me so this intervention, maybe in a way that would help them and me and all of us move one step further, into sanity or into what we call a state of equilibrium, or just being sort of normal, living a normal life. And maybe we can turn it into an opportunity. So that's the context of leadership, as I understand it, when we talk about the crisis that's happening now.
Okay, and just to build on that, one of the things that I've been thinking about and observing, as I look at how different leaders from government or private sector or elsewhere are managing their communication through this time, how do you speak to the truth of what's going on and make sure that you speak to people's struggles, right? Because some people are disproportionately affected, others are not affected. But how do you do that, speaking the truth, but also providing hope and managing, right? There's a tension there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because a lot of this is about expression, or the power of expression and
Yes.
communication. And you can just observe, some people do it in a way that resonates with me and others don't, right? So then how do you teach leadership in terms of the communication aspect?
Yes. Well, I'm a great believer in the power of truth. For me, if there's something called universal law, at least when it comes to the subjective world, to the way we act, the way we behave beyond the objective world. If there is something that is called, at the core of what is an absolute universal truth, universal rule, that for me would be, at least one of the few ones would be truth. So I see no substitute to that. And you can't exercise leadership if it's value-based leadership, i.e. it's value-based, at least positive value, because there are also negative value. So in the sense that it means well, it goes towards enhancing the human condition. If that's what the intention behind exercising leadership, then there's no substitute to truth, because you can't, otherwise you'll be dealing with illusion. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with a lie, especially if you're conscious that what you're communicating is not the truth. And equally important, you're manipulating people. So if we talk about leadership the way I understand it, which is about enhancing, mobilizing people so that you can enhance or collectively together the human condition, there's no substitute for the truth. You have to say the truth. Now, what is truth? That's another complicated subject, because you can go into endless conversation about that. So the simplest thing to start with is truth is about not lying. So don't twist the facts, right? At least don't lie about the facts. And so that's the beginning, because if you go into a conversation of what truth is and what absolute truth, this has no end. But the definite thing is that, okay, the sun is up now. There's a consensus that the sun is up. So don't lie and say the sun is not up, right? So start with the fact. And maybe if you want to take it a step further, is that if you are an experienced person when it comes to leadership, maybe check your interpretation of the truth with some people whom you trust in terms of common sense and in terms of advice. Is my interpretation of reality correct? This is the way that I'm defining the truth of this reality. Is this accurate? So because we all have biases, and we have fears, and we have our complicated personalities, and characters as well, and our own demons and the own wishful thinking and the whole complex layer of the way we view the world. So if you have a support structure of people whom you can go to and check if the way you're interpreting the reality is accurate, then that's the starting point. Then you know at least you're standing on solid foundation. The next step is to communicate this in the wisest possible way, because you can communicate the truth in a way that hurts, and you can communicate the truth in a way that's elegant, and in the way that it is considerate, always to achieve the same objective. I mean, we have children, and we know that the way you communicate to a 5-year-old is different than the way you communicate to a teenager, and it's different to when you communicate to a 35-year-old. So it's the same truth, but you have to present it in a way that doesn't sacrifice its truthfulness, but it makes it more comprehensible from the receiver point of view. So there's no substitute to truth. Now, I'm going to add another dangerous word to the word truth. It's not a very popular word because it has been abused and overused, which is the word love. So if you mix the word love with truth, and you keep in mind that you're communicating truth to the others, whether they are individuals or they are groups, with love, with good intention. You're doing it to build, to construct, not to destroy. Then you're on the right way, because truth without love sometimes could be unbearable, right? Sometimes it doesn't change reality itself, right? But it's out, because sometimes reality is so hard that it becomes unbearable. So you have to always package or wrap truth with love without twisting its content and offer it, because you're trying to construct, and whatever you're doing, it's either building or destroying. It's either helping or hurting, right? So you have to make your choices. Why am I communicating truth? If it's to build, then you have to do it in a way where the foundation is love, so that you can construct. And based on that, then you start making, at least a realistic and truthful connection with people. And that will be the foundation for your interventions when you exercise leadership. Because, in the end, you're telling them, listen, my friends or my family or my colleagues or my, countrymen, this is our reality, the way I'm seeing it, right? Now, if I'm wrong, tell me, but that's how I'm seeing it. And we don't seem to have any choice except to deal with this reality in the smartest possible way, even if we're going to make some mistakes, so that we can get out of this mess, right? So what can we do together so that we collectively work, right, in a way that's aligned, maybe not with the same vision, but at least for the same purpose, so that we can move from this reality to a better one. So the core of this communication has to be truth, but always has to be, love has to be there. Compassion also has to be there, but compassion also could be dangerous, because you have to use it wisely, because you don't want to, for the sake of compassion, to sacrifice the truth. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I think the best favor you do to people is tell them the truth in the nicest way. So even sometimes if it's bold, but you can't twist the truth or mess with it just because you want to be compassionate. You're hurting the other people. You're hurting them. So
love and solidarity.
Exactly. So you have to have wisdom in all of this, and wisdom comes from experience and from mistakes and all of it. So if you're riding that wave, if that's your orienting philosophy, then the way you can improvise and design interventions become more sensible, and with trial and error, especially when you're going into unknown territory, eventually you'll get it done. Why am I hopeful? Because, and you mentioned hope with this, because of the amount of our potential for resilience. Now, we're not born resilient because we're born as fragile babies, but we definitely have unimaginable amount of resilience, at least in the context of human life. if we work on ourselves well, if we build our character well, if we build our value system well. So hope is always there. Why is hope there? Because hope for me means if we do the right thing and we keep an open mind and we stay adaptive and flexible and learn from our mistakes, right? And keep, not give up to despair and keep moving forward, eventually we will get there. It might not be easy, it might be messy, because life is messy. It might be sometimes painful, but if we keep doing the right thing and keep an open mind to learning, hope means I have faith that if you do the right thing, eventually, if the results are not guaranteed, at least it's the best option, because what's your other option? What's your other strategy? Do the wrong thing? That's destructive, right? That's suicidal. So you have no choice but to do the right thing. So, and be hopeful that, maybe you have a higher chances of succeeding, that if you do the right thing, eventually you'll end up on the safety, on the side of safety. And that's the nature of life. Is anything guaranteed? No. But you can't sacrifice truth, you can't sacrifice love, and you can't sacrifice doing the right thing, and you can't sacrifice being adaptive. After you've done all of this, enjoy. If it doesn't work, what do? You have to accept it. That's the nature of reality. I mean, that's how life is.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Truth, love, and look, I guess the power of truth and love on the people that are maybe materially impacted, right? That can go a long way in providing hope.
Yes.
And I think, through this interview series, what I'm trying to do is hear different perspectives such as yours, so that we can share our stories, right? And a lot of people are coping. A lot of people have different needs, different circumstances, right? And that's why I want to do this, because as a psychiatrist, right, we see the variability across different groups, across different cultures, and there isn't something for everyone, but I think there is a right way forward. And I'm so glad that you're speaking about truth and love, because these are such basic principles, but so important. So I have a question for you, just to shift gears a little bit. You've always said you have so much experience, and you've worked for Reuters. You've seen different crises, right? You've probably reported on different crises. You've managed staff during crises. You probably have a very strong philosophical and spiritual view. I just wanted to know, for you, either spiritually or existentially, if you look at what's going on now with SARS-CoV-2 and this pandemic, what is your view? And whether that's like a long-term prediction of where this may go. I mean, you spoke to it in the beginning, or just philosophically, like, how do you view this as similar or different to other things you've seen?
Definitely in terms of magnitude, scale at least, I mean, this is of historic proportions. I mean, when did you have in history, written or unwritten, told or untold, billions of people in lockdown? Now, in terms of number of casualties, unfortunately, and that's a very painful part of this reality, is it's not unknown to history. I mean, remember several years ago when a major tsunami hit Asia, 200, maybe 250,000 people died in 5 minutes. Well, in matters of minutes. So this scale of tragedy is not unknown. Is not unknown in history, but it doesn't matter. When you live in that reality, it's still painful. I mean, you can talk about tooth pain as much as you want, but when you have it yourself, that becomes your reality, and for you, that's your drama. What you want is to remove this pain from your teeth, right? So in the context that this is a painful event in history, of course it is, and as I said, if you maintain a realistic view to the nature of life, I like this phrase, the nature of life that's derived from the nature of reality that's derived from the reality of nature. You see what I'm saying? So what's the reality of nature? The reality of nature, these things happen, you know. A baby deer is born, and 3 minutes later, it's eaten by a lion. It's the reality of nature, you know. We have, lion cubs everywhere, and then a lion attacks and it kills everybody, right? So that's the reality of nature. We can't negotiate that. We can't argue with that. That's how it is. So the beginning has to be accepting this reality of nature. And in some cases it's unfair, in some cases it's, it's shocking, it's painful, but if you put it, in the cosmic level, or at least on a universal level, it's really fair because it's the same rules for everybody. You see, so it's the same rule for everybody. So in the sense of it is unfair to everybody, depending on how you call it, how do you define fairness? In that sense is, the same rules are, if you're here, everybody, is under gravity. If you go to the jungle, everybody is under the same kind of threat. So if you accept that sense of reality, and if you're peaceful with acceptance, if acceptance is a friend of yours, if you've made friends with the fact that life, if you've made friends with the fact that life is full of uncertainty and ambiguity, right? So if you have made friends with these aspects of the nature of reality, then it makes it easier. Then what's your responsibility? Your responsibility is that in this context of reality, is to remain as sane as possible, as functional as possible, at least by doing your best to take responsibility for your own life. Because if you don't take responsibility for you becoming or remaining functional, then indirectly, whether you like it or not, you've become a liability to other people, especially the people who love you most, right? You become a liability to them if you can't take care of yourself physically or emotionally or economically or socially, right? Because you can't say it's not your problem. It is the problem of people who love you because they care about you, right? And you don't live on your own. You live in a context of family or friends, and there must be somebody who is linked to you in some way or form, because we're all interdependent. So your first responsibility is to take care of yourself and carry your own burden, right? Make sure that you're not a liability or an extra burden to other people, because everybody is busy carrying their own, burden, carrying their own baggage, fighting their own challenges. So, and I find that as a basic, the most basic duty, the most basic moral obligation is just to take care of yourself. That's number one. Yeah. Number two is you want to go a step further, and now we're going into the context of the universe of leadership, is help other people take care of themselves, help them really reduce some of their burden, reduce some of their pain, reduce some of their suffering, create opportunities for happiness, create happy moments for them and for you, make life more bearable for them. If something hits your family, then at least try not to collapse, right? And if somebody else is collapsing, maybe you can support them. And maybe if you want to take it further, maybe you could be the strongest person in the family, the pillar where, inspires everybody to be strong, to summon their intrinsic strengths and resilience and pull themselves together. So maybe you can play that role if you want to expand, the horizon of your impact. And if you want to take it further, maybe you can do that to your larger family. Maybe you can do that to your, colleagues and community. And if you are in a place in history where you are influencing or you can impact, millions of people and even the international community, maybe you would keep that in mind and help them, make meaning of what's happening, make life more bearable for them, right? And inspire them or mobilize them or do whatever it takes, right? So that their journey of survival and growth becomes more productive, or at least less painful. And if you can't do that, at least please don't create more mess. If no problem if you can't do that. No problem if you say, you know what, I can't take all this responsibility, right? I can barely carry my own weight. No problem. I mean, beautiful blessings to you, at least because you're not being a liability to others, but at least don't make it worse. So I think if we keep that perspective of how do you stay standing on your feet during these difficult times, how do you keep inspiring yourself, keep uh, fighting your own battles so that you can continue to see hope when everything around you is dark, then well done. Then if you can do that for others, then even better. And I'm hopeful because I believe in our internal strengths. I believe in what we do. And history is full of examples of people who tolerated horrible stuff. I mean, look at genocide. Look at global wars. Look at the massacres that happen in history. Look at famines. Look at plagues. And here we are, 21st century, and we're doing fine. We're messing up life at so many levels, but we're doing great things also at so many levels. We've solved problems of hunger. We're solving that. Medicine is getting better. So many aspects, that deserve the celebration. Of course, we continue to learn, but that's part of. There's a name for that. It's called life, right?
Right.
So that's how I put all this in perspective, and as I said, I start from myself, and then if I can, become a candle of light to other people, then even better. And these lights where you can control the intensity of the light, you can dim it and you can turn it into a projector. So it's the same analogy. If you can't, maybe it's a dim light, but at least you have light around you so that you don't fall. But if you have strength, then go ahead, man. Become a floodlight. Exactly, a projector. Become a floodlight. Become the sun if you can.
Yeah. So we share our light. I love that.
Exactly, because people need that. People need that, and you're going to need it at some stage. And if not you, your kids or your partner or people around you. Yeah. So, and I see no alternative to that, because the other alternative is just things becoming worse, and there's no bottom to how things can become worse. There's no bottom to that.
Yeah. And, I was going to ask you a final question, but I think you've answered it. I was going to ask you, for those, how would you speak to those who, for example, are on the front line as a healthcare provider, and time and time again, they're seeing people coding, they're telling loved ones that their, family member has died, and then they get up, they do their job, and it happens again and again and again. Or, excuse me, or the family where COVID-19 disease is clustering and they're losing multiple people so quickly. How do you speak to those people, right? And I think what you've said, I love the example of light, because if you're still resilient and can still project and still carry others, then it's okay. But if you feel dim or depleted, in a psychiatric sense, energetically, then find light, and that will help you rise and help you get through this time.
Yes.
I've answered the question that I was going to ask you.
No, it's beautiful. No, we're having a conversation, so it's beautiful. So I'm not surprised to see these people. I'm not surprised. Because I'll tell you why. Yeah. Because in my professional life, I started my career as a war journalist, and I covered wars. So I have seen firsthand. Serious wars, not screen wars. Serious wars. And I have lost friends, and I've seen people lose friends firsthand, right? In 1 month, 3 of my colleagues died. Right? They're doing their job, and that's it's not an uncommon story when you're in that line of business. Of course, soldiers get this all the time. So what I'm saying is, I'm not surprised to see the doctors and the nurses and all the people who are, helping others to get through this by using their skills and experience and whatever they can offer, because this is part of the beauty of what being a human is all about. We do ugly stuff, and sometimes we're ruthless and we'll do some horrible things to each other. But at the same time, we can be so loving that we can sacrifice our own well-being for the sake of others. And this is a beautiful manifestation of what being human is all about. And so I'm not surprised. Now, the other thing is, it's also a wonderful example of inspiration. So when people see that, the way people reacted to the doctors, and almost everywhere, at least in many, many countries, people expressed gestures of gratitude by clapping hands and doing all kinds of gestures to say thank you. And so when you see this, you say, my God, it's beautiful to be a human being when you see these moments. So this is part of human nature, and it says a lot about the resilience and the strength of these people, and it says a lot about the potential for resilience and strength we have ourselves, especially in our weak moments, because we've seen our brothers and sisters and friends and other people who can go through even harder times, right, by not only supporting themselves, by every single day, supporting people every single day. And it's a reflection of who we can be in these moments.
Yeah.
And what I say to these people, I mean, you're heroes, and there will be times that you're in trouble and you can't be a hero. So what I say to you, all of you, all these people who did all these great efforts, is don't be shy to ask for help yourselves, because you've done your share, and there will be times in your life where you will need help the same way that you offered others help. So don't be shy, don't feel guilty, not for a second. You have more than earned it, right? Even before doing what you've done, but now even more, to ask for your share for help, to ask for your share of peace and tranquility, to ask for your share to have your own space, to ask for your share to do whatever it takes to rebuild this energy, to come back to, fill up your heart again with all the emotions and all the love and all the, the energy that you need to go back and restore your own life, right, in the most sort of normal way. Because what you've done is huge and is deep, and I'm sure it has been draining. So maybe after you've done what you've done to other people, it's time that you take care of yourself the way you took care of other people. To restore your sanity. And by doing that, you would also be providing us with a lesson, right, about the right way of doing things, right? So, the importance of asking for help when you need help, the importance of taking care of yourself all the time, the importance of appreciating yourself and tapping yourself on the shoulder when you've done something that you're proud of, or even though, regardless of the result, at least when you've done your best. So there's so much to be said for them, and for the people who are who have suffered. What can you say? Words are not enough, and we talk about that the default, the nature of reality is suffering. This is not. It's naive to call life a journey of happiness. Maybe the purpose is to increase as many happy moments as you can, to create happy moments for you and others. But to say that, we're not in heaven. This is a journey of survival, right? And it's not an easy thing to do in this complex life. So it's your share now. Hold on to hope. After every winter, there's always spring. Never doubt the resilience that you can have. And some wounds will be healing maybe with time. Some wounds will never heal. Right? Some wounds will never heal, but that's your share, and other people have their own share, and if it's not now, they will get their share later on. So we have no choice but to be, to accept the nature of being human, and to carry our wounds with grace and with compassion, and to capture every possible opportunity of making the best of this life, and every happy moment, to capture it, not leave one happy moment, fleet, right? And create more happy moments, because that's what life is. There's a famous Lebanese philosopher. His name is Khalil Gibran.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he wrote the famous book called The Prophet. He says life is a smile and a tear, right? It's a smile and a tear. So it's your turn now for the tear, but hold on, the tears will dry. The mark will still be there maybe, but it will dry, and there will be days. There will be days of plenty of smiles, and
yes.
and maybe that's what being human is all about.
Yeah, and I think for those who, are very affected by grief and loss during this time, it's also important to find ways to laugh and smile. It's okay to do that. I think a lot of people that I've spoken to feel guilt, right, to feel happy, but that's also part of this time, right, to find the happy moments with the sadness. It's always a juxtaposition, I think. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, and that's when people feel guilty that they're happy, it's actually a positive thing, in the sense that it's a further expression of how beautiful they are from inside, because it's a sign of empathy, that I'm so empathetic that I want to connect with you in your grief, and I don't accept it to myself that while you're in pain, how can I be happy? So it shows the depth or goodness that exists in that person. Of course, it doesn't mean that they should do that. They should capture this moment because it's a gift, right? But it shows that there's so much space for happiness and love in their heart, and sooner or later they should make use of that and not feel guilty at all, because it's their time. I mean, let them use it before the second wave comes, because it's all waves, right?
Changing, yes.
Yes. Storm, and then it's calm. Then it's another storm, and then it's calm, and then there's a tsunami, and then it's calm. So when it's calm, go and swim. When it's a tsunami, hide. I mean, whatever. So
exactly.
that's how life is.
Yeah. Michael, it is so lovely to speak with you and hear your wisdom and your strength and resilience through this. I think it will help a lot of people. It's a pleasure to meet you this way, and I hope to meet you in person one day when we're physically undistanced.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My regards to your audience. It's beautiful what you're doing, and I can see compassion and love going, through your words. And I wish you all success, and anything I can do for you, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Michael. So now let's get clinical first. This is the first time that I've spoken with Michael Kouly, and I don't know about the effect of his words on each of you, but I, for one, feel inspired to hear him talk about truth, love, and a perspective on the reality of nature and of being human. And for me, this is the power of effective leadership. So let's review what we've heard. Michael has spoken about core values of leadership that are important in general, but especially in times of adversity and crisis. The truth is important to be told, and love, but not necessarily compassion, should accompany this for him. When I hear this as a psychiatrist, I think about the latter, love, as a protective factor, namely the healing nature of social support, understanding, and empathy, and how it can help people to heal and help people find a way forward during times of adversity. Let's talk about his perspective about the reality of nature. I would say this. From a personal perspective, I have always observed from a young age the reality of economic inequality, the reality of war and conflict as an ongoing possibility in life. For me, this is personally rooted in the role the partition of India and Pakistan had played in the history and fracturing of my family in previous generations. And both of these led me to work earlier in my career in post-conflict mental health. I have seen and studied mental health and the infrastructural impact that a complex emergency can confer to a society and its people. Michael, likewise, through his journalism career, has seen the reality of war and conflict as part of the cycle of our existence. However, I am mindful that there are those who may never have been exposed, whose consciousness is being sensitized for the first time by such a global crisis, and who are existentially struggling with the why. But if we look at history and even poetry, such as Khalil Gibran's piece that Michael mentioned called a tear and a smile. We know that this has happened before. And as Michael mentioned, most people are resilient. And we know this also in the mental health field. So if you're not feeling so resilient, it's okay. Find others who are, lean on them, and use their light of resilience as a source of love, strength, and support to fill you up as you rest, so that you can find your energies and capacities back. As always, if you are not able to find your energy despite leaning on your supports, and you are feeling overwhelmed in a way that does not allow you to be yourself, please seek help from a medical doctor or behavioral health provider. I'm Dr. Allie Sharma. Thank you for watching Coping with COVID-19, and thank you to Michael Kouly for doing this interview with me.